Let's get to Republican John Barrasso of the great state of Wyoming, Senate Majority Whip and member of the Foreign Relations and Finance Committees. Great to have you on the program today. I want to talk about what's at stake with what's happening in Minnesota. You've got a former vice presidential candidate who's being looked at this, the governor of that state, Tim Walz, and you've got Congresswoman Ilhan Omar and others being looked at. What's at stake here?
Well, the fraud and corruption in Minnesota, and especially among those elected officials, is staggering. And as you said on Friday, Harris, that's just the tip of the iceberg that we're seeing right now. What we're seeing is something that's criminal, it is massive, and it is sleazy. And it looks to me that the officials in Minnesota were well aware of it. They looked the other way because they needed the votes of a certain community there. It does look like it involves the governor, who's a Democrat, who was the nominee for vice president of the United States. And it also looks like money has been funneled not just to criminals, but also overseas and possibly also to terrorist organizations. And what's making this so sleazy is so much of this money, they did it under the guise of trying to help children and children with autism. They didn't care at all about that. They just wanted more names to put under more fraudulent documents. And then the people in Minnesota, it looks like, rubber stamped it. The money started to flow, and they never looked back. This was set up to defraud the American taxpayers. And I'll tell you, we need to go after all of these folks who need to be held accountable for what I believe is criminal behavior.
You know, Senators, you were talking about what was happening. Our detail today that we're drilling down on, one of two of them, is the food programs. I mean, you've got a congresswoman on Capitol Hill right now, Ilhan Omar, whose people in her very own staff, one of whom has already committed and is convicted because they confessed to doing this, that they took $2 million in food that was supposed to help people during COVID and used it for personal benefit. I mean, this is a big deal, reaching all the way to Capitol Hill. What are the ramifications there?
Well, there needs to be legal proceedings. You got to go after these people who I think intentionally refused to follow the law, and the officials in Minnesota really didn't go ahead and try to enforce the law. And we've seen this also in Medicaid there in Minnesota with fraud there. We've seen it with the food programs. We've seen it with welfare. Apparently, they were trying to sign up so many people they ran out of names. So went to a website, www.randomnames.com, to make up names. And the money was so big, we understand that some of it went to buy BMWs, Mercedes-Benz. Some of it even went to buy real estate overseas. But it does look to me, Harris, and I think you had Kim Strassel on last week, so many of these government programs are just set up to be taken advantage of, and the Democrats seem to want to do that. They don't look for accountability. We're seeing it right now with Obamacare and what the Democrats are trying to do with these additional Biden bonus COVID subsidies. And as the Wall Street Journal pointed out today, you know, Obamacare is a mecca for fraud.
Well, look, I'm looking at my notes here because I know we have a bit of a quote to speak to what you're saying. I mean, the Medicare, Medicaid is so important, that, as well as the Senate is set to take a test vote Thursday on this part of it. The Wall Street Journal editorial board writes that those subsidies are, quote, a mecca for fraud and ripe for gaming. Here's part of it. The GAO last fall began an undercover test into which it submitted insurance applications for fictitious individuals to the federal Obamacare exchange and insurance brokers. Nearly all of its invented people were able to enroll in subsidized plans despite submitting false or no records to verify their identities and incomes. Senator, as we learn more about this, the American people, you used one word, but they've been ripped off and they cannot be reimbursed.
Yeah. And Obamacare continues to fail the American people. I'm a doctor, practiced medicine for 24 years. I want people to get the care they need from a doctor they choose at lower costs. Obamacare has made that essentially impossible. And so the Democrats realized the failures of Obamacare, so they propped it up with big subsidy checks directly to insurance companies. Doesn't go through people, doesn't go through consumers. It goes right from the federal government to the insurance companies. And look, you know, Obama promised that premiums would drop by $2,500 a family. Instead, they have doubled, and the insurance company loves getting those checks. Their stocks are up 500 to 1,000%. So Obamacare was never affordable. And what the Democrats are trying to do now is saying, oh, my gosh, we need to keep these COVID subsidies going, these added bonus subsidies, and they want to send another $100 billion directly from the federal treasury to the insurance companies. And Republicans are saying, look, American consumers ought to have a say in that. If we're going to send money, it ought to go to families who they can make the decision of what works best for them. Give them the opportunity to make the insurance companies compete by lowering the prices, by offering other opportunities for insurance that works for that specific family, not the straitjacket that is the one-size-fits-all of Obamacare.
And look, the shutdown that Democrats perpetrated on this entire nation and put people even in a bigger financial hole to be able to afford Obamacare when it does go up, unless they can agree with Republicans to do something to actually reform the system. I mean, that is even more unforgivable on the parts of Democrats, what they've done with that shutdown, and still didn't fix the problem. Great to have you on the program, and thank you for all of your years as a doctor. It really played a role today, as I'm sure it did for many of your patients for years. Good to see you, Senator.
Harris. Great to be with you.